Rivalry week. That's what it's come to here. Week 13 of the college football season. And this is the Tailgate brought to you by campuscanton.com. Matt Bruning. Barnabas is here with us this morning. Barnabas, you're a new face on this show. We've had your segments on here before, but our first time live with you. So welcome on here with us this morning.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
We Thanksgiving weekend here, guys. So I'm sure most of you are out with your families. Thanks if you are tuning in here with us. Our goal, as with every week, is to get you guys ready for your championship matchups here this weekend. We're gonna answer start sits as they trickle in here throughout the show. So if you've got them, drop them in the comments. I see Luke's already sitting in here. He's trying to go back to back this week. That's what we love to hear. A lot of games played already, and we've got a lot of injuries to monitor. We're going to keep monitoring those as they trickle in. A couple that we already know something about in the game here. Travion Henderson is not going to play, and Mayan Williams is. So I wouldn't necessarily start Mayan, but he's going to be playing. Blake Corum is going to attempt to play, is the wording that we've heard. We'll see how that works out. Donovan Edwards is in at running back for Michigan. Those are the big injury updates we have so far. Malik Cunningham is a game time decision, so that's a nothing burger in terms of information. Any other ones that you're keeping your eyes on here, Matt, as we start to trickle closer to this noon kickoff time?
Colin Schlee, and if anybody has any word on him,
not that it's personally affecting Matt or anything, but yeah.
Personally, I know a friend I know is wanting to know how that one is going to be. Those are really the big ones that I can think of. I mean, I can't think of any other real big name players we are waiting on. It's really been just those running backs for Michigan. As you said, it's kind of been cleared up for Ohio State. It's really just kind of, as far as I know, I would say Malik Cunningham's probably the biggest one at quarterback, because if he does go, you would think he's probably going to be somewhat good for you against a Kentucky defense that's been okay most of the year. Outside of him, there's no other names I can think of off the top of my head we're wondering about.
Yeah, we've got some of the TCU guys a little banged up, but we probably won't get any information on them here for a little bit going into the day here. Some games have kicked off. I mean, I've already played here this week. With Thanksgiving, we had some Thursday games, the Egg Bowl. We had some games yesterday. Barnabas, I actually want to come over to you on this. Florida State played last night, and Anthony Richardson, the box score is not great. Completed 30-something% of his passes. Yardage was pretty decent though out of him. There it is, 9 for 27, 197 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Added another 41 yards on the ground. I actually thought this was not a bad performance overall. Where are you at on Anthony Richardson as a prospect, as a player? Do you think he should go back next year? Kind of give us a rundown on what your thoughts are on a Rich.
Sure. So I confess I only watched a brief moment of the game yesterday when Jordan Travis punched in from one way. Looking at the box score, I'm confused where all the points came from, because it wasn't a shocking offensive performance. There was less than 1,000 yards in the game, which with that scoreline, you would expect at least 1,100 yards, probably, if not more. But in terms of Anthony Richardson as a draft prospect, I really think, I think we as a company have said he probably is going back to school, and I think that's probably the right decision. The tools are there. If we want to talk about tools, he has more tools than Will Levis. Let's be honest here, but.
Poor Will Levis.
He doesn't have, he's gonna catch strays all day. But Anthony Richardson, probably a 4-year guy, and once it comes to that level, he needs to have a Hendon Hooker type resurgence in terms of showing polish, and probably in a new setting as well, in order for him to really be considered a top tier blue chip prospect. And even then, we talk about tools, Lamar Jackson was the tools guy coming out. That's what we think of, at least I do, when I'm evaluating someone that we're drafting for tools. And Lamar Jackson had one fatal flaw, which was his footwork. And they fixed his footwork, and they tailored the system. It took a year or two to tailor the system. But once they tailored the system, Lamar Jackson is an MVP caliber player. A-Rich has a couple more flaws than that, and a lot of that is above the shoulders, and so he does need to show a little more polish on that in that sense. But I think he has the ability to play himself into a day one conversation, but it requires him going back to school, in my opinion.
Do you think it's okay for him to stay at Florida? Do you think he can kind of get that development there? Or do you think this is the kind of guy, obviously, we can't really predict these things and we have no information, but would a transfer away from there somewhere where there's maybe a little more track record of quarterback development be better for him?
am kind of undecided on that. I think
Okay.
I don't love the Florida system, but I think that if A-Rich tries to go to a system that is going to be a spread passing and limits his running ability, that might show scouts what they want to see, but it might show them what they want to see and that he's not a good prospect. And so I think it would be a bigger gamble to transfer away, but that gamble could really pay off if he can really get his passing down.
Like in Ohio State, that some people are trying to ship him to, which I think would be a horrible spot for him to go to.
What, the
I don't
squarest of
understand
pegs
that.
into the roundest of holes? I mean, is that what we're talking about with that?
I
match?
don't
mean,
understand that. I commented on that thread earlier today. There's a lot of people. I just don't. Some people I don't think pay attention to college coaches and systems and just assume that, oh, because Ryan Day has done this, that he can take any quarterback. That's not the kind of quarterback he wants. That's not. I like what Barnabas just mentioned right there. That's exactly the system you don't want him to go to. You do not want him to go to an Ohio State.
Any system that will require him to be accurate.
Yeah.
I do just want to give you kudos there, Matt. It only took us about 6 minutes for you to somehow steer a completely unrelated conversation into Ohio State for the day. So good work there. Good work there.
I saw Luke had the over under, and I was trying to win him some money. So.
All right, well, let's just some other performances in that game real quick, guys. That was a 45-38 win for Florida State for those that didn't tune in. A great game. If you can go back and watch it, I mean, now you know what happened. Sorry. But a really good one. Little ETN. We haven't decided if that's a good nickname for him or not. 17 carries, 129 yards, 1 touchdown. Outperformed Montrell Johnson on the day on the same amount of carries. Looked really, really good in this one. For Florida State, Jordan Travis, not a great day passing for him necessarily. 13 for 30, 270 yards, 1 touchdown, but he had a crazy rushing touchdown. One of the best kind of scramble TDs I've ever seen out of quarterback. I'm sure you've seen the clip by now. Just go search Jordan Travis on Twitter. He'll pop up there, but he had himself a day, as did Trey Benson. I think we're going to have to talk about him a lot this offseason. I don't know if either of you guys necessarily have formulated, concrete thoughts on Trey Benson, but he transferred over from Oregon this offseason, and it's looked like it's really paid off for him. 20 carries, 111 yards, 3 touchdowns. He caught a bunch of passes as well.
Yeah,
like they're really using his skill set there. He's 220 plus pounds probably. I mean, he's a bigger back. He looks like he's a pretty good athlete, not groundbreaking. I mean, do either of you guys have any sort of great formulated thoughts on what Trey Benson you think moving forward he could be?
I have not watched a ton of Florida State, so I won't lie. I don't. I know Corey and Mike seem to be very high on him. I know they've talked about him a lot, but I have not. I watched the first couple of games this season of Jordan Travis till he got injured, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of let Florida State fade to the background after that.
Yeah, I haven't seen all 22. I've watched a little bit of Florida State I went to grad school at Florida State, so I watch occasionally. I don't have a huge affinity towards them. From what I've seen, he plays bigger than I think he's even listed. Like, he looks big on the field. So 6'1", 220 seems like on the low end for him. I, in general, think that the NFL is going to be moving a little more towards bigger backs, actually, and that kind of helps that the bigger backs are coming out now. But I actually think we're shifting a little bit, and so I think that helps him. Decent contact balance, but I need to watch more. Yeah.
It's an interesting question here from Chris. Stuck between Jace McClellan, Kenny McIntosh, Kendry Miller for a flex RB, starting Brad Roberts, Izzy, and Eric Gray. So let's talk about that before we talk about the tight ends here. I think that Jahmyr Gibbs is out. That's what I'm operating under today. I don't think he's going to play at all for Alabama. I haven't seen any news on that, so it does sound like McClellan probably gets that start and probably gets the bulk of the carries there. Kendry Miller, we don't have any news on, and he's a dangerous one to gamble on because I believe his kickoff is later than McClellan. Like, if you're sitting on Miller over him, you're ruling out McClellan immediately since he kicks off earlier. I think I would roll either McClellan or McIntosh. I don't think you can go wrong with either. I might lean McIntosh just because Georgia Tech is a worse opponent.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I'm looking for Jahmyr Gibbs, and it has not said anything. So
I'm assuming no news, not even chatter means that he's probably not going to be rolling out there for this one.
Yeah, I would lean with McIntosh as well because we know he's going to get a decent amount of carries at least in this Georgia game. I expect him to kind of blow out Georgia Tech. I don't think it's going to be close. Kendry Miller, we're still kind of concerned about whether he'll be good to play, and even if he does, he's not 100%. And Iowa State, we talked a lot this morning on Better Sports how good that defense is. I mean, Iowa State's a top 10 ranked defense against the run. I believe they're number 8. They're barely allowing 100 yards a game. I don't know that Kendry Miller would be able to get going against this game anyways. Now, maybe he breaks off a big run like he did against Texas, but I would feel safer playing Kenny McIntosh than I would Kendry Miller.
Yeah. All right. If you guys have more questions, feel free. Oh, there's a tight end question here too. Gums or Fant?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know who either one of them are, so I cannot answer that
Fant's
question.
Tennessee. And I think I would roll with him. He's been highlighted decently in this offense, although I don't know what this offense is necessarily going to look like
with Milton,
which does make, but I think I would lean with Fant between those two. Thank you for that. We've also got McClellan or McClellan, Damian Martinez, or Cedric Tillman. I'm going to roll Martinez out. I think he'll struggle against Oregon today. Tillman or McClellan?
Man, I think I'd go with McClellan. I just don't know what to think about Joe Milton. So that's kind of my big concern.
Here would be my answer as someone who's actually rolling with Tillman in a spot today, Luke. If you like, I don't like playing the dangerous games with injuries, but both of these guys will be healthy. McClellan's more locked in on volume, but I think Tillman has the higher ceiling on the day. So if I know I'm going to need some points today, I think I'm rolling Tillman out there and hoping he goes like 8 for 110 and a touchdown, because I think that's definitely the range of outcomes for him against his Vanderbilt team today.
You think Tennessee's going to be passing it that much? Like,
I think
they're just going to try to shove it down the throat?
Yeah, okay. I think that they've not been super effective rushing the ball as of late. I don't know.
I mean, Vanderbilt's best player on defense is a linebacker, so like fair, but also
there we go. What's it? Is that Orgy or whatever it is?
Yeah.
All right, so that answers that. Keep them coming, guys. If you want to drop your start sits in here, a couple other big games so far that I've already played. Let's look at that Baylor-Texas game. This was a pretty good one, honestly. Texas ends up pulling it out 38-27. Bijan is really the guy to talk about here. No one in this game had a great day beyond him. He ended up with 29 carries, 179 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kind of maybe his last hurrah for fantasy managers here on the college side of things, but certainly left us thankful for his points here right around the Thanksgiving holiday. Bijan Robinson, do you think an NFL team is going to take him in the first round, Barnabas? I mean, there's not that much discussion to be had about him beyond just where he ends up really at this stage.
I think the short answer is I don't know, but I've heard many draft pundits who are actually plugged into teams that Jahmyr Gibbs might also be a first round pick. So that inherently means that Bijan also has to go in the first round because he's worlds better than Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think some team will take him. It's not, I don't know who has the stability to take a running back that early, but Bijan obviously is the best in the class by a country mile. And I think someone will take him. Maybe one of the teams will trade back in from the second round, but he'll probably go first in my opinion. Yeah.
Do you have any big concerns about him translating to the NFL, Barnabas? Like really, I mean, he's pretty freaking well-rounded. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so we were concerned coming into the season. His average depth of target was actually fairly low for a guy that you would want to see as a pass catching threat. I've been on this train all year. I think pass catching is overrated in running backs. It's like 40 times for interior defensive linemen. You don't want him to run a 6.0, but you also don't need him to run a 4.4. Like you want a defensive lineman that's functional in other areas mostly. Same thing with running backs. You want him to be a runner first and then a pass catcher. And like pass catcher is icing on the cake, but to draft a running back based on that is a little bit nearsighted in my opinion. And Bijan is as good of a runner as we've seen in a while. So I'm not concerned at all. And his other concerns are might be durability size type things, but that hasn't been an issue yet really. And so I'm not concerned at all.
Yeah, he's had 1 or 2 injuries in college, but they've been weird things, like that elbow injury where he kind of fell weird. Like I don't know if that's something that you have to be careful for. And he had another one too.
Right.
The neck.
The net.
Right,
Oh,
which
he's
was
fallen
just
on his head like 5 times.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the
that is
elbow one too. I actually think it's because the defender like fell on him. It like shoved his arm the wrong way. I remember watching that. It was pretty brutal. But yeah, it's been weird. It's not like he's had like multiple ACLs or hamstring injuries. It's been
Right.
weird injuries.
Yeah, another start sit question trickling in here. Full PPR: Evan Stewart, Matthew Golden, Damian Martinez. Opposite team has Toon as a QB. If you want a Galaxy brain in it, well, as a matter of fact, I do want a Galaxy brain it. Matt, any thoughts on this one?
So I'm picking one of those: Evan Stewart, Matthew Golden, or Damian Martinez.
I'm probably taking Golden. They play a UTSA,
I think so
I believe.
too. Because Evan Stewart's getting LSU. I talked a lot about that this morning. I think they're going to struggle against that defense. And I just don't like, I think Damian Martinez is probably going to be Oregon State's offense. I just don't know how good that's going to be. I do think it's going to be a close game. I don't know that he goes off like 100+ yards and multiple touchdowns. So I would go Golden.
We both did pick Oregon State in that game, didn't we?
Yeah, with the points. Yeah.
Sports.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I still think it's going to be a close game. I just don't know that Martinez has like a great game today. That's my big thing. I don't think it's going to be a shootout.
But he's going to get the volume, right?
Yeah, he'll get volume, but I don't think it's going to be like 41-38. Like, I think it's going to be more of like a 24-21. Maybe Martinez is the one who gets all of that, and he could do it. I think Golden. So when it comes to championship games, unless I'm looking at my score right now and I'm down like 70 points, like I am in an NFL Dynasty League where I went up against Josh Allen and Justin Jefferson, if I'm not down like some massive amount, like I want safe guys that I know are going to get me points and then just see what happens. I'm not playing a guy who I hope just like goes off, but may only end up getting me like 7 points, which I think is a shot with like I can see Damian Martinez getting 15 carries for 70 yards, but no touchdowns. Like, that's great that he got the volume and yards, but he doesn't get those touchdowns. Like, he could hurt you. Where Golden, at least he's getting you PPR points with the catches as well. I think he'll be targeted a ton. Should be a high scoring game. So that's why I would lean Golden. I think Stewart's out of it regardless for me, but.
Yeah. Also, last time I checked, Goldbranson's passing yards prop was like 178 or something. Like, he is not expected to get passing yards here. So
it's because he's bad. That's why.
I mean, that's fair too. My point is that, if they're going to get more than 200 yards, Damian Martinez is going to have a good chunk of those 200 yards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's where we're leaning there. One final game to just kind of touch on real quick, this Egg Bowl that we got. And it sounds like Lane Kiffin's not leaving. So we'll get another Kiffin, Leach, Egg Bowl here. Mississippi State ends up pulling this one out 24-22. If you had Zach Evans in this game, I'm so sorry. We created a tilt channel in the Discord specifically for people to just tilt their asses off all weekend, and that was the biggest complaint after Thursday. So I'm sorry, guys. But we did get a Quinshon Judkins performance here that was reasonable. 22 carries, 91 yards. Didn't score for the first time in a while, I think, and only had one catch for 4 yards as well. I mean,
and a pass.
Future is bright for
yeah, he did have a pass. Yeah.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he had one pass. Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. Was it complete?
It was. I don't remember. I think it was for like 10 yards or something like that.
There we go. Our QB1. What can't this guy do? So yeah, I mean, so not a great performance. If you started either of those
7 yards. I'm sorry, it was for 7 yards.
Ole Miss running backs, you're probably in some trouble. So but we still have full faith in Quinshon Judkins moving forward, right? That's really
very
funny.
true.
Yes,
that's good loot.
I mean, Loxley before this game was pushing what? Quinshon Judkins, what was it? 128 or something?
Yeah, 121.5, I think, was his yardage prop. That's a case of just somebody being beaten down so many times over the past few weeks that he felt like he had to make the play, and then he finally was like his Quinshon's luck is going to run out here eventually hit.
Yeah.
So good times there. All right, let's talk about some stuff moving forward here. And Barnabas, I'm glad that we have you on here because you are a draft guy. Like that is really like what you like to dabble in. You are watching all these guys from a pure NFL draft standpoint more than a lot of us are. So I want to hear your thoughts just on how things have shifted over the course of the season. Some guys that you think have really helped their stock this year. We'll talk about those first, and then we can maybe talk about some guys that had the inverse. And Mayan Williams or Devin Neal. That's a very unserious question. You're starting Devin Neal. I'm assuming that was Felix who was logged into the wrong thing, as per usual. All right, take it away, Barnabas.
So
Sorry.
yeah. So my season starts probably next week, right? So I'm really excited for that. I have a few things in the works. But some guys that I want to talk about. Well, Austin, I saw you talking about Fashanu. Tell me what you saw about him, and then I'll let you chime in first here on that one.
Yeah, so I'm not an offensive line expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I know for a lot of times when you're taking these offensive tackles early, like you're looking for guys that have, they move really well. They've got good size. He's got some really nice flexibility as well, from what I've seen, which I think could be an important thing for some of those offensive tackles. He's 19 years old, which I think, age doesn't always necessarily matter, but if you can draft a guy that's that good at that age and kind of get him into the NFL early, I like that as well. Like just from an athleticism perspective, and he's held up well too. I've only watched 2 or 3 Penn State games this year. I haven't been watching specifically for him, but I don't remember ever watching and just thinking like that left side of that Penn State line just getting like overrun. Like I thought he's played really, really well in the spots that I've seen this year. So I'm a big Fashanu fan. I hope the Steelers take him as kind of their left tackle of the future.
Yeah, I saw a lot of similarities with a lot of Steelers offensive linemen in the past. So I think there's a non-zero probability there. I like him as well. I do think the age factors in. Like I think he does get a little bit boost. Granted, I will admit I haven't like dug deep into the all 22 yet, but I've watched him a couple times. I'm a big 10 fan. So I think he holds up really. Like he's a road grader on the run. He gets a little bit tight in his hips when he's trying to get to his pass sets a little bit. And there's no better way to cut your teeth than against Big Ten edge rushers, if that's your problem. And so he's held up. I think he needs a little bit of development. I don't know that he is for sure a lock to come out this year, but I think if he does come out, at worst, he's a day 2 guy, in my opinion. He looks the part. When I think of the ideal offensive tackle prospect, you think of like Tyron Smith coming out of USC, right? The dude has maybe 10% body fat. Like that's probably on the high end compared to most offensive linemen. That's like crazy. The dude looks like he should be like a WWE wrestler.
He's
honestly.
ripped at 320 pounds. Like that shouldn't be humanly possible.
And
so
he puts
weird.
knee braces on his elbows. Like I don't know if you've heard that one, but like he actually puts knee braces on his elbows. So just a monster of a human being. So if he's the ideal prospect, physical specimen we're looking for, with a decent skill set where he's moving his feet correctly and he has enough. I call it sandbagging. If any of you have read my articles, I always talk about sandbags. He has the sandbags that to hold up in terms of power. It's the finesse part we're a little bit worried about, but he moves his feet well enough as with power, and so like it should be just a technique issue. So I think he's really boosted his stock. He wasn't really on our draft radar. We thought he'd kind of go back to school at the beginning of the season, but I think he's played himself into at least day 2 draft capital. I know we love saying that, but And then another guy that really wasn't on our radar at the beginning of the year was Jalen Hyatt. Talk about like a crazy, development here. Like we knew he was a speed guy, and we know speed plays. Tyquan Thornton got picked in what, round 2, round 3, something like that, right? Like that's bonkers for a guy that basically hasn't played this year. I don't even know. I don't watch Patriots football. I watch very little NFL football in general, but has he even played this year? I don't know. Like
so he was banged up coming into the year, and he's been okay in spots. He's done some things. So
yeah, but for a guy who clocked in with the smallest wrists in the entire NFL combine and still drafted that high, we know Baylor loves their wide receivers of unusual size, but Jalen Hyatt really at one point he was averaging 2 touchdowns a game, like on average, which is nuts, including that crazy Alabama game where he was just running by those safeties, like without a doubt, just a speed guy. And so we knew he had speed, but he's shown that, he can produce even against high level defensive schemes and high level defensive players. So, he's definitely on my radar, and, speed plays. Teams fall in love with those 4.2 something 40 times in the process. So
do you think he can play on the boundary is my big question with him, Barnabas, because we haven't seen him do it yet. He's got great tools. Do you think realistically you could project him to that role, or do you think he has to be more of a slot guy with, he's kind of a skinnier, but he does have some height on him?
I worry less about boundary versus slot. I worry more about scheme wise. So like, look at the way the Cowboys use like CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's really a slot receiver, right? But the way he plays on the outside is really more like a slot role, traditional slot role that we're used to in past years. I think if a scheme can get him open and off of free releases and such, then I think he's fine. He's not going to beat press. He's just not. I mean, he's taller than he looks. Actually, he's like, I think he's what, 6 foot, six.
He's listed like 6
maybe
foot 6'1", depending where you're looking. Yeah.
Right. So which means he's 5'11", right? So he's 5'11". He's not going to beat press. It's just not. And that's okay. A lot of receivers struggle with press. And so as long as you can scheme him where he doesn't have to fight the corner and he can just run past them, then we're fine. Like DK Metcalf also can't turn, and I think Jalen Hyatt has better turning ability than DK. So, I think he definitely has the speed to play here, and that burner speed is really going to attract a lot of teams. Speaking of another physical guy, Clark Phillips from Utah. We all knew he was small. Like he's listed at like 5'10" or something, which means he's like 5'8", right? 5'9" ish. That's really small for a corner. So everyone's question was, can he play on the boundary? And he's been playing mostly on the boundary this year and been playing fairly well. That USC game, he was playing really well. Granted, Mario Addison got hurt, but he played really well. He's been playing physical. We knew he could tackle, and he's showing he can tackle on the boundary as well against these boundary corner wide receivers, quote unquote out. So big. I was on him during the offseason, I think, and that I thought he was going to be good. I'm okay with him playing only slot in the NFL too. That's obviously a valuable position. But I think he can play in the boundary as well. And, he's going to run well enough that it's going to jump off the screen as well. I'll take Clark Phillips. I think he's really good. I was on him fairly early, but I think the scouting community liked him a little more than teams are, but teams are going to catch up really quick, I think, as well. And then finally, Michael Penix. I've had a couple conversations on Twitter recently about lefty quarterbacks. Lefty quarterbacks struggle, and I think they struggle not because they're necessarily placing the ball wrong, but the ball moves differently than right-handed quarterbacks, and so wide receivers and tight ends really struggle with the way that ball spins. And I had that one clip that I always post about Brennan Armstrong, where if he was a right-handed quarterback, that ball drifts in perfectly to Jelani Woods on that one touchdown. And Jelani Woods scores anyway because he just turns all the way around. But on a right-handed quarterback, he walks in, and because Brendan Armstrong's left-handed, he had to kind of beat a guy off a tackle to get into the end zone. So, I think lefty quarterbacks get a ding on their record anyway. But that being said, Penix has played himself into draftability. He was definitely UDFA territory, maybe not even priority at the beginning of the season. Obviously we didn't know he was coming off injury. We didn't know what he was going to look like. He's been productive enough that he could get a camp arm look, like at the very least, like that, what was his name? The UConn quarterback that the Steelers picked in this past draft to just be a
Ola Doken or Olakoden or whatever his name is. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Oludokun. Yeah. Chris Oludokun. Yeah. He's draftable as a camp arm at the very least now, which was not the case 3 months ago. So interesting to see how he plays in the process. I have a
there's a risk that he's basically Carson Strong from a medical perspective, though, right? I mean, that is a possibility.
I haven't done enough medical research on that yet.
He's had multiple knee blowouts in college already. So
Carson Strong has a chronic injury, though, like a chronic condition.
He does. That's true.
Yeah. He's had multiple shoulder injuries as well, hasn't he? It's not just been his knees.
Well, he's been in college for 7 years, so take some
beating. He's an old man. Yeah.
He's an old man, but people love his character, whatever. I have a feeling personality-wise, he's gonna get like Tyree Jackson at the combine, where the coaches had to tell Tyree to take a little off the ball because he was just smoking that thing in on a gauntlet drill or whatever. And so I think Penix is like one of those kind of character guys where he's gonna try. He's a try hard a little bit, and some coaches are gonna like that. So we'll see how he plays out through the rest of the process.
I like a lot of those names, and Hyatt, Phillips, even Penix. Felix is in the chat. Damn it, he heard me say that. But a lot of good players there. In terms of guys that you think have kind of hurt themselves a little bit this year, what are we looking at?
As a Maryland alum, Pete the Helmet, like I got to start with Jalen Duncan. He basically was the reason why Maryland, like not the reason they lost, but the reason they couldn't get their comeback going, because Zach Harrison just beat him on back-to-back plays, and the second one was a sack fumble, and like Ohio State recovered in the end zone. It was just, it wasn't a good 2-play stretch, but he frankly hasn't been good all season, and I didn't really get the hype I've watched every Maryland game. I didn't get the hype coming into the season. Brugler was in on him early, and he said he was a top half of the first round type tackle. I didn't really see it. He has the build, and granted, he could get a Bruce Campbell type, draft hype into draft and get drafted in the top half. But I think technique wise, he lacks a little bit. He has the size, and he has the experience of, I think he started 3 years now. And so like he has the experience, he has the build. He just doesn't have the technique, in my opinion. And like, I don't know that it's teachable at this point if it's been this long. So I like him as a person, and he's done a lot of good things for my team. But I think in terms of long-term projection, it's going to be rough. And I don't know that he has even enough sandbagging ability to do power rushers, because I mean Zach Harrison is fast enough, but he's really at its core a pass rusher and a power rusher. And so if you can hold him off in the most crucial of situations where you only have one job, which is it was a boot the other direction. You literally only have to keep him from getting past you. You don't have to like necessarily keep him from going through you. And so you had one job and you couldn't do it. And that's just last week. This whole season has been a little rough for him. That offensive line in general hasn't given the quarterback any amount of time. So I'm a little lower on Jalen Duncan than most to begin with, but I think he's shown that he's maybe a late day 3 type guy, not a day 1 type guy. And then everyone's draft. I'm glad Felix is in chat for this one. Everyone's draft darling, Cam Ward. It has shown that there was a reason he was an incarnate word. Like Washington's a far cry from San Antonio, but it's just the record doesn't show how poorly Cam Ward has played, in that the stats might look fine, some of the throws look okay, but it just shows he can't play in structure. Like I don't know that any of his plays are like that notable, in that he's making NFL type reads. Not really. He's he has the skills that we thought he had, which is like a decent arm. He can scramble around, he can create out of structure, but that's not really what teams are looking for anyway. Like they want quarterbacks that will produce in structure, because that's the way they scheme it up, and that's why so many Ohio State offensive players get drafted so often. And so Cam Ward is shown that he doesn't have that NFL skill set, and I'm not sure, does he have eligibility left? Like I don't know, but
he has a couple years left. Yeah, I think he has to go back.
He has to go back at the very least, and like I just don't know that he can show anything unless he goes to a system that's going to make him stay in the pocket and throw it. Like he needs to show that ability, and we haven't.
Just real quick, Jay, what am I drinking? I've got a mimosa here this morning. So the only way to really get prepared for rivalry week is classy alcoholic beverages. So that's where I'm at here this morning. Sorry, Barnabas. Continue on here.
Yeah. For sure. And then someone else that I talked about, I think, on Campus Life before the season was Brandon Joseph. I really like him, and I think he's going to have a great game today. He needs to. We'll talk about that a little later, but Brandon Joseph, Brandon Joseph is like the epitome of, numbers wise, he looks great, but you look at him in person, you're kind of like, oh, that guy as an NFL player, I'm not so sure. I think that before the season, when he transferred into Notre Dame, people thought he was actually going to produce even more, which was a tough call for someone who, goes from a Big Ten where they don't pass it all that much, but he had great production, to a team that's, solely relying on their defense, and it just doesn't have the offense that'll at least hold the ball long enough for the defense to, catch their breath. And so while Notre Dame's righted the ship since that tough opening few games, I think Brandon Joseph, I had him as a high day 2 guy before the season, and I think he's probably around 5-ish kind of guy.
Wow,
now.
Really? You think he falls that far?
Yeah, who was the Syracuse guy a few years ago? Cisco, was it? You're right. Like
Yeah, Andre
he was the
Cisco.
type of guy that was letting touchdowns left and right, but he was getting picks every once in a while, and people similar to like the Trayvon Diggs effect, right? Where it's like, oh, it's just picks. It doesn't matter. Like yards is given up, I think Brandon Joseph, has had decent production this year in terms of PBUs and, he's played well, but he's just small and his production wasn't the type that necessarily, like if it was a bad defense and he was the only good player, I think that's a lot bigger deal. And that's why people were hyping him up coming out of, what was it, Illinois? But now that he's on a good defense, it's like, oh, well, Foskey's creating all the havoc up front. So, he's playing well, but how much of it is him and how much of it is just the people around him? So I think there's a little bit of a, I think the narrative's going to change a little bit going through the process.
One last name here, and this is going to be an interesting one because this is really going to hit some of our fantasy folks here. Jackson Smith and Jigba at Ohio State, and it sounds like he's not going to play again today. I mean, he's not even listed as potentially going to be out there. Hasn't played. I know you make fun of the way he runs. You're a hater. Whatever, Barnabas. Just tell us why you hate JSN. Let's just move along with our day then.
Well, Matt, I have a question for you. What do people say about the character of JSN at Ohio State? Like, do they say he's a good guy? Is he a type of person that's a little bit of a drama queen or whatever?
No, there's been anything that I've heard has never been negative. In fact, I guess if you want to classify this as negative, the biggest issue there's been is him. I don't want to say fighting is the wrong word. Like he's wanted to play and the coaching staff and medical staff have had to tell him he can't. And that's kind of been like a big thing for him is like he keeps saying that he's good to go and he wants to be back out there. That's the only negative I've heard is like he keeps pushing to get back on the field and they keep telling him no. So
I think that actually hurts him here. Wait, and hear me out. This sounds like I'm trying to circling around here.
This is hater.
Okay,
sure.
I've been off of him. Well, okay. So going into the season, he needed to show that he could play outside receiver because all he did was play in the slot last year. Which, like, fair when you have those two guys on the outside. Okay, fine, whatever. Although a nice light breeze might blow over Chris Olave, but JSN needed to show he can play out of the slot, and he hasn't played this season. And if the injury is bad enough that even if he wants to play, the coaching staff won't let him, then that tells me that that injury is probably more serious than we're hearing about. And so now we have injury concerns for a guy that more than likely is trying to play, and a guy who needed to put things on tape. So like, if the coaching staff is keeping him out because they're like, oh, you're going to get drafted or whatever, or we need you for the playoff push, whatever. Fine, but you still need to put that stuff on tape. And so they're not helping him. Are they holding him back for a reason? Like there's so many questions now when before it was like, okay, Jason just needs to play on the outside and we know he can do it, whatever. So that's fine. He has those short legs that I think is going to look weird. Let's say he's healthy for the combine, which I think he's trending that way. At least the combine's a long way off, but let's say he runs the combine. People are going to notice those short legs when you take off the pads, right? Like, and so I think scouts are going to ding him a little bit on that build, and he needed to show that he could play on the outside, and I don't know that he can with that build. We still have that question while we have now more questions with the health and everything. I still think he's a late day one guy. I think some team who's pretty settled on their roster, who's just looking for high upside guys, they might just take a shot on him at the end of round one because they don't think he's going to come around again in round two. But that injury, I think, dings him because he's a high character guy. So I know that sounds like I'm trying to play chess when everyone's just playing checkers, but I think that actually dings him more than people realize. And teams are wary about health now. Like that's a thing. Like look at Kayvon Thibodeau. We all knew he had a lot of injuries in college, but now he's still going down every other play in the NFL as well. Like I think teams are trying to go healthy these days because availability is the best ability, right?
Yeah, especially if you're going to take a guy early in the NFL draft.
Yeah.
More resources invested there. All right. So In terms, this is your first season playing C2C, right, Barnabas? You're in this
Yep.
one this 2014 that we're in. So your first one, you just jumped into the deep end. It's a difficult league. It's 24 teams. It was like an auction startup. It's single copy in college and then double copy in NFL. So it kind of makes your rookie picks worth something when you have that second copy available. It's why I really like that format. This is your first season doing one of those leagues. So just in terms of what you've learned or what you've liked or disliked, what are some things that you've kind of taken away from your first season doing a league like this?
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of fun. It was tough, but not impossible. I made it to the playoffs in the college side, which I was very proud of, considering, I was not as deep in as you guys all are. And, I thought I knew football, and then I met you guys, and I was like, oh, I know nothing. Cool. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I think one key thing is that I think the college side is way more fun. I made a trade earlier this season that people were ripping me for a little bit. In that I traded away Jonathan Taylor for 3 college sophomores. And which I learned a lot from that process as well. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the college side is way more fun because these long-term dynasty leagues get a little bit stale when people aren't moving their rosters around. And so I think the fact that you're forced to turn around your roster every year because so many guys are, getting drafted or graduating. I think it's way more fun. And two, it helps my process a lot. I finally understand where all these production people are coming from because now that I know what fantasy production looks like from these kids, it's like, oh, now I understand, Cooper Rush, for example, back in those days was probably a college fantasy stud. And a lot of the production people were screaming because he still hold the record for most career passing yards at Central Michigan? Like the guy can't throw more than 15 yards, but somehow he was a productive guy. And now I get that perspective because, during the draft process, I was like, this guy can't play to save his life. And so I think it refined the way I look at players, and that I can more accurately pick out which games to watch of these players. Before, my process was just like pick one high production game, one low production game, and then one middle one if I can find one. But now that I have a little more contextual knowledge, I can more accurately pick which games I need to watch for players to evaluate them. And then, the 2 copy thing was new to me for sure. And that kind of brings about where I kind of got bored of the NFL side, but I also think that the 2 copy makes players so much less valuable. During the auction, I was throwing money around left and right just to see what would stick. And
Yeah,
ended up with
we
4
battled on a
RB1s.
lot of players there. We battled on a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
players. I was not
Those
happy with you
players
for a few
especially,
weeks
yeah.
in the middle of the summer there as we were drafting.
Yeah. On the college side, I went all in on Nick Singleton and then tried to make PJ pay for some tight ends. And then, and then on the NFL side, I ended up with 4 RB1s. I ended up with Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, and Austin Eckler. I kind of accidentally ended up with these guys because I just kept bidding on them because I figured, oh, these are RB1s. And I think, one, we're seeing an NFL shift away from running backs. I think everyone's just going to go to committee now because there's so many good prospects coming out. And also just running backs are getting tired in 17 games. So I think we're seeing a added perspective shift a little bit on that sense. But also just the NFL's, because there's 2 copies, so many times I've played against players that I'm playing for, and that just kind of cancels everyone out and makes the roster shorter. And, I had its trouble as a draft person managing the back end of my roster as well on the NFL side, just because I'm picking up all the names that I know from the draft, because my trouble in fantasy has always been picking good players over productive players. And that's bitten me in the ass a couple times this year as well. But that Jonathan Taylor trade for Troy Franklin, Devin Neal, and Michael Trigg was definitely a choice. And I kind of regret it, but also I don't, because I think the college side's more fun anyway. So I'm looking forward to next year.
Yeah, the college side is so much more fun.
Yeah.
I tend to put a lot of my focus into my college rosters now. And if best case scenario, you end up with a class, you just got a ton of guys coming up, and then it's a lot of fun when they all hit the NFL. Well, thank you for some insights on that, because I know we've all been playing it for years here now. Our thoughts can get stale, so it's interesting to hear from somebody that it has just started off playing one of these leagues, and kind of what how quickly it sounds like you've fallen, I don't know, in love with the college side like we kind of have. So, all right, guys. Well, let's win some money here. How's that sound today? Let's get some people some cash. And just as a reminder, if you guys have any start sit decisions, please toss them in the chat. We're still answering those as they pop up here. We're happy to address any of them. We're going to talk some prize picks here, guys. Promo code C2C is going to get you a initial deposit when you sign up with prize picks. Promo code C2C gets you an initial deposit match up to $100. And if you deposit at least $20, you're going to get $29.99 off any membership here with us at Campus to Canton. We also dabble a ton in, the player props market. So, and we've been pretty hot lately as a group in terms of giving out these public plays. So we'll win you some money as well. Barnabas, I'm going to come to you first actually here. What do you like today? And I like that you picked a Maryland guy.
I had to. I don't get to do this often. Man. Yeah, exactly. I don't do this often. I gotta throw all my Maryland boys in there. Roman Hemby over 73.5 rushing yards. I think that's an easy hit. Honestly, he could do that in probably 2 runs, knowing Roman Hemby. He's been really struggling against the better defenses the past 3 weeks because it was Wisconsin, Penn State, and then Ohio State back-to-back, which was a combination of game script and just good defenses. He's finally facing a defense that is not impossible to run against. In Rutgers, I was joking literally with my parents this morning. I was saying, my parents were asking why Rutgers was our rivalry week game. And I said, because all our other rivals are busy with their more important rivals. And so we play Rutgers practically every year after Thanksgiving. And it's always confusing because Maryland always loses to Rutgers in years they're doing well and always beats Rutgers when we're doing poorly. And so my homer pick is that who knows this year because Maryland has played well and poorly all year. So it's a toss up, but I think game script, I think Maryland's going to run away towards the end and Hemby's just going to pound the ball. And he probably has one good long run as well. So I think that's an easy hit as well.
Have you been impressed with Hemby this year? I just want to ask you real quick. I mean, exceeded expectations, Roman Hemby for you?
Yeah. So all reports coming out of camp was that Hemby was going to be the starter, but it was going to be a solid committee. In our C2C league, I picked up Ramon Brown fairly early with a lot of draft money, frankly, in hindsight, considering that Hemby is a redshirt freshman. But he definitely exceeded expectations. The reports coming out of camp were that Hemby was the fastest by a long shot from all the running backs. And so we knew he was going to get at least volume, and he's gotten that. But at that first game when he started just pulling off these long runs, it was pretty clear that he was going to have a easy handle on the running back room. And so it definitely exceeded expectations, but not in terms of role, more in terms of just ability.
Yeah, he's been really, really sharp this year. What else do you like today? We got to pair it with something. What are we pairing it with?
Yeah, I got Tinsley over 66.5 receiving yards. That Michigan State passing defense is atrocious. I mean, just awful. And maybe Clifford's finally is this in Happy Valley? I don't even know.
I don't know either. Yeah, sorry.
But it's in Happy Valley. So it's Clifford's last game at home, right? And I think this game gets to the point where even Drew Lar probably comes in late in the game. Michigan State's not going to go bowling because they're running into this wall that is Penn State, and maybe Penn State sneaks into the top 10 to finish the year. But I think Tinsley easily gets that, 66.5 receiving yards, because I think they're finally going to be able to pass the ball against this porous pass defense. It's just bad. And I think Clifford's going to get time in the pocket as well, which hasn't always been the case. I mean, yeah. And then finally, it
is in Happy Valley.
I've only been to Happy Valley once, but they get crazy up there during game day. So, and then finally, I have Cam Rising over 1.5 passing touchdowns. It's gonna be a fairly easy game for Utah, and Colorado is obviously a mess, but the Utah running backs haven't been super inspiring this year. So I just think that they're gonna go back to their roots and just pass the tight end all day. So I think that's an easy hit as well. The running backs might get them close, but they're going to go to their comfort plays once they get in the red zone, and I think those are their tight ends.
I like it. Matt, we talked some on Better Sports this morning. What better price pick stuff do you like today?
Really quick before we get to that, Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum are both on the field going through warmups right now. Blake Corum is wearing a significant brace that you can see easily underneath his uniform pants. Donovan Edwards' right thumb is completely and heavily wrapped, is struggling catching the balls right now. So, just updates from Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum right now.
So you can't. Are we just gonna? You should sit both of those guys. We can't
I think you
possibly
have
rationalize
to.
putting them out there.
Yeah, I think you have to. You just have to. Anyways, on to my prize picks. Evan Hull, running back for Northwestern. I'm taking his over on his 71.5 rush plus receiving yards. Illinois is a good defense, and they were able to somewhat slow down CJ Stokes last week after Blake Corum went out, but Blake Corum was absolutely gashing them, not just on the ground, but in the air. And I'm not trying to say Evan Hull is Blake Corum, but he is their offense. I do think he will get some receptions. I think that 71.5 is just easy to go over. He's done that most of the season. He had a couple bad games in there where he didn't go over that total, both rushing and receiving combined, but I think he can do that today against Illinois. Jaden Daniels fantasy points at 21.5. I know that the Aggies defense is very good against the pass. They're actually the second best pass defense, but they are the 123rd ranked rushing defense, which is actually where I think Jaden Daniels is going to get most of his points today on the ground. He has crushed that number most of the season. The only game in the past 8 weeks he has not done that actually is against Arkansas, coming off that game against Alabama. He's been in the 30, 40s, and even 50-point games at times this season. I think they're going to have a big day today against the Aggies and run it up on them. And last but not least, Chris Rodriguez, the running back for Kentucky, 110.5 rush yards. I'm taking the over on that. I know Louisville, as Austin mentioned earlier this morning against Better Sports, has had a good rush defense most of the year, but as they got into conference play, they have struggled. I think they're going to rely heavily on Rodriguez, and he's absolutely crushed that since he's come back from his 4-game suspension. In fact, the only game he has not gone over 100 yards was against Georgia, which is understandable. Georgia is a very good defense. LSU, I don't think, is anywhere near the conversation of the defense that Georgia is. I think he easily goes past that 110 yards today.
I like all those, and then I just have a couple here. My first one, and this is a big one for me here today. This Austin Reed fantasy points prop, 26.5 fantasy points is his line on Prize Picks right now. I'm taking the over in this. He's been crushing this line pretty much all year. He's taking on an FAU defense that is like the best thing you can say about them is they might be middle of the pack pass defense wise, which is just not great if you're going up against this Western Kentucky group. They've got some weapons at wide receiver. They've got some weapons. They've got Austin Reed. They can actually run the ball a little bit this season. And I'm going to pair that if I can find a third thing to go with it. Maybe one of the other things someone has said here today with Malachi Corley, his top wide receiver, 17.5 fantasy points today. I like the over for him there as well. I think he's going to have a monster game in this one. I wouldn't be shocked if he hits 30 points total on this one because it is PPR, remember, full point PPR. So a lot of these wide receivers get some nice boosts there. So I like him. And then the other one I'm going to play here is this Cameron Rising line. I've actually been going back and forth on this one, but I do think he hits the over. I think he hits 22 to 25 points with Tavion Thomas having declared for the draft. They're banged up at running back. They play Colorado today. Colorado, they have to move the ball somehow in this one. I actually expect him to have a nice day. I expect Dalton Kincaid to have a nice day. I think they'll both finish decently for fantasy purposes. So that 18.5 feels very, very low. And I'm surprised it hasn't moved at all with the Tavion Thomas news. I know he's banged up, but I thought it would go up there a little bit. We've had some coaching news actually this morning, guys. I want to ask you real quick. We've had, it sounds like maybe two new coaches getting close to signing deals here. Matt Rule in Nebraska, former Panthers coach, former Baylor coach, Temple, the whole shebang. And then it sounds like Hugh Freeze might end up being the guy here at Auburn. It sounds like Lane Kiffin's going to stay, and Auburn really had focused in on either Kiffin or Freeze. Matt, do you like both or either of these hires or none of them? I mean, what are your thoughts on these two coaches potentially heading to these two stops?
Well, I love the Matt Rule hire. We talked a little bit about this on Better Sports. He's shown the ability to rebuild programs. He took Temple to a team that ended up being very competent at their level, one of the better teams actually at the time that he was there, which ended up getting him the Baylor job after all of the allegations and the scandal that went on there with Bryles, and rebuilt them into the program they are now. Like, it seems like a lot of people think Dave Aranda they built that. He did not. He took over after Matt Rule built that program up. It's actually what ended up getting him the Carolina Panthers job. So I do think it's a good thing for Nebraska. I think he will be able to build them up. I don't expect them to be up there with like Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State, but I do think he can get into that second rung of teams. And with the conferences probably going away here in a couple years when USC and UCLA join, like, I would not be surprised when this thing expands to 12 teams if at some point Nebraska and Matt Rule are in the hunt for a playoff team in that 12-team expanded playoff, because I do think that he can build this team up and make them competitive. Hugh Freeze is an interesting one for me. I really don't know what to think about him going to Auburn. I do think Auburn is a good job, as we talked a lot about, on here, Debbie Debate, multiple different shows throughout our network, that I think, when we were talking about possibly Lane Kiffin going there, I think that they'll bring him in. He is a good offensive coach. They've talked about having money to try and bring players in. I just don't know what to think. I mean, I know he's been successful at Liberty, but Liberty's not Auburn. The biggest thing I think for me is Freeze has got to recruit. I talked about this a little bit on Better Sports. Auburn has actually been in the SEC, strangely enough, in the past 10 years, the best team against Georgia and Alabama compared to everybody else. You would think LSU, with some of the seasons they've had and everything else, would have better seasons. They haven't. It's been Auburn who's given Georgia and Alabama more losses than anybody else in the SEC. If he can recruit, I think that he will be fine, but that's going to be the biggest thing. I don't know how good of a recruiter Hugh Freeze is, if I'm being honest. So I really don't know what that means, but I think that's the way he will bring Auburn to a top. I don't think they'll be Alabama or Georgia, but to be close to them in the SEC, he's going to have to be able to recruit the Georgia, Florida area, bring in that talent, and I think the offense will be good enough to compete with those schools.
Freeze is an offensive guy, right?
Yes.
He is, yeah.
So that's what concerns me, because I think Auburn's identity is as a defensive team, right? They've had so many defensive studs come out of there and go on to the next level. I'm interested to see what kind of defensive coaching he might bring with him, because it's just that I don't think the boosters will be as mad at a 10-13 loss as they would, a 55-40 loss. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it looks different. And I think that town is used to good defenses. And so I'm interested to see there. I think Matt Rule has the right. Matt Rule arguably had the most Big Ten like Big 12 team when he was in Baylor. And so I think it's an interesting pick. As far as I'm aware, by taking another job, he forfeits his $40 million from the Panthers. So I'm interested to see the financials on that deal as well. From Nebraska.
I'm interested to see if he has to forfeit all of that, or if he has to forfeit like he can make up the 40 and the Nebraska money eats into like whatever that top balance is on the 40. That's how those are usually set up, but I'm wondering to see if that actually ends up being the case.
Yeah, for sure.
Real quick, if anybody has any news on Colin Schlee, pass it along in the comments. I'm tilting like crazy over here, even more so because I just, for being stupid, went and looked. Clay Millen put up over 25 points yesterday.
You idiot.
So I am not happy. I am tilting like nobody's business over here, especially because it really looks like there's now more and more reports coming out that Malik Cunningham is not going to play, even though it was listed as a game time decision. Multiple people are saying he's likely not going to play. So any news on Colin Schlee? I've been hitting up Kent State, beat report, nothing. I can't find anything. I would really, anyone just, know if I'm taking a zero there. There is also a lot of reports coming out that Colorado just offered Deion Sanders their head coaching job.
Yeah, Jay's actually asking about it too.
Yes, yeah. On3 just reported that. I don't know. I don't know that would be. I mean, I think Colorado would be able to probably bring in some decent recruits, because I do think Deion's a good recruiter, but I don't know what that would do for them. And Pac-12 is about to get weaker with USC and UCLA leaving.
What does Colorado provide for Deion Sanders, though? Like, I don't know why that would be an attractive job for him, other than just like moving up, I guess.
So I can't remember who reported this, There's apparently it was a big name. I don't want to put a name to it because I don't know if it was like a Pete Thamel type, but it was someone in that area, a very well renowned college reporter, reported that a lot of ADs have issues with, I guess, some stuff that happened with his camps and the
Oh
way some
yeah.
stuff
He
happened
had like an academy,
financially.
like a school. Yeah.
Yeah, the Primetime Academy or whatever. And I guess some stuff fell through with that. And so there's a lot of schools that would be hesitant to hire him because of some shady stuff that happened with it. I don't know the exact details. So maybe this is his way of getting in, improving himself at this level, and then moving on after that. I don't know. I know Colorado, there was another team I saw that were like very interested in hiring him. Maybe those are the only two schools that are actually coming after him.
Yeah, I saw those reports as well. I think it was like kind of a tried to make a new IMG and ended up with a Bishop Sycamore type situation. But like I don't know how being at another Division 1 program proves anything about that, if that makes sense. Like other than like someone else was willing to take a risk on him, so I guess we can too. Seems like an odd way to do it. But if the argument is he needs to ladder his way back up, I don't know. Like, frankly, selfishly, I hope he holds out and just takes Florida State as his first job and then just takes them to glory. But I guess we'll see. But I don't know that as a coach I would want to coach at Colorado. It just seems kind of odd.
They haven't been good in a long time. I mean, I think part of what's going on with Dion, and this is probably not like informal negotiations, but I think he and his son are a package deal. For anybody that's not familiar with his Shedeur Sanders, his quarterback right now at Jackson State, he was a 4-star when he came out and then followed his dad there. I think he's an okay player. Like, I don't think he be thrown around for like Auburn or something. I don't know that he's good enough to play in the SEC. So Colorado might be a solid spot for him, but I think that is a major consideration for Dion, at least initially.
I mean, arguably Travis Hunter is coming too then, right?
I would think.
Oh, Hunter's going for sure wherever
Coleman,
he goes. Yeah. Kevin Coleman as well. Yeah. I do think that that Shedeur is probably a package deal, because if you go look anywhere on any of these transfer portal articles, like, he is one of the top names listed on everything on a guy that everybody's expecting to transfer this season. I think that's why. I think it's because everybody's expecting Dion to move on and take some job up here. And at that point, Shedeur would transfer with him. Yeah. Hunter, Kevin Coleman, I think, would definitely follow him as well.
It sounds like Marshawn Lloyd is warming up here today. So we'll see what ends up happening with that split with him and Jaheim Bell. It makes Jaheim Bell. So if Marshawn Lloyd's a go, does that make Jaheim Bell a little more difficult of a play here today?
Yeah, I think so. How healthy do we think Lloyd really is? Like, I still think Bell could end up getting some carries and being I mean, I don't know, focal point of that offense, but a key player for them. Again, I don't expect South Carolina to score more than 20 points, because it was 13.5, then it moved to 17. Now we know it's 19.5, if I'm remembering correctly. So I don't think the team total goes over that, though.
Just a couple other injury updates here that have come in the past 30, 45 minutes, and these are all from at FBS Fantasy Foot on Twitter. If you don't follow him, he does a great job kind of just putting all the injury information in one spot here. Sounds like Ethan Kalikmanis, I think I don't know how you say his last name. The backup for Minnesota is probably starting. Tanner Morgan looks to be out. Spencer Sanders, not exactly warming up today, so we'll see what happens with him there at Oklahoma State. Could affect some things. Raheem Jarrett is out. Your guy, Barnabas. Raheem Jarrett, not going to play.
I've been down on him all year. I don't know if you guys remember.
I do. And then it sounds like Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell, is warming up as well. So just some updates. Don't start Adonai Mitchell. Don't do it. But.
Did you mention LaDainian Webb?
No,
is dressed and warming up.
There we go. That's a big one for people that were worried maybe about LaDainian Webb.
Is he a transfer now?
Like the transfer out? Yeah, he came from somewhere, LaDainian Webb.
Yeah, he just he was somewhere and then he was at JUCO and then he came out.
Yeah, I feel like he was Florida State, wasn't he? Or maybe not.
I think that's right.
I think he was Florida State. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Yeah. So, thoughts on Lloyd Pro potential, real quick. Somebody just asked. Luke asked. I think he can get there. I think he can be an okay NFL back.
He's like a Corey Clement type, I think.
There we go.
Floats around on rosters for a while.
I love Corey Clement. Joke's on you.
Okay.
All right.
Maybe the worst Wisconsin back we've seen in a while, but yeah.
Yeah, pretty crazy that he's really been the guy that hasn't really hit. All right. Well, I mean, we have no DFS stuff for today. We hit all of that on the Bet on T2C pod. No betting here today. So that's going to do it for the show here. If no one else has any other start sits, guys, good luck this week in your fantasy matchups.
You don't want to pick the games?
Oh, we got to pick games.
Yeah.
Nah, we don't need to do that.
That's fine.
I'm definitely not like in last place. We don't need to do that. Yeah, let's pick some games. That's my bad. South Carolina, Clemson. It's just straight up. So give me Clemson.
Yeah. Same. I don't see any way South Carolina ends up winning this game.
I would love to see the chaos that would be caused if South Carolina wins, because then suddenly Spencer Rattler cements himself as quarterback 3 in this class, ? And that would be fun to watch. But yeah, I don't think there's a shot.
All right, we're all going Clemson here. Next up, the Iron Bowl, Bama, Auburn. I don't think Bama covers. We talked a lot about this on the other show. The line has moved to 22.5 now. But I still like them to win this game. It's rivalry week. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. I don't see a kick six happening in this one. I think Alabama wins. Auburn covers. Alabama wins.
Yeah, I was gonna make a Leonard Skinner joke, and then I realized Auburn is also in Alabama. So, you got me.
I had it for you.
Yeah, well, I was gonna go with Dixieland Delight joke after that, but then I couldn't find a good lyric for it. So anyway, Alabama. This one's for you, Justin.
All right, next up here, Oregon State. I'm going to stick with what I said on Better Sports. I think I could see myself sprinkling some Oregon State money line here today. I think they could win this game. It's at Oregon State. Bo Nix banged up. Give me a low scoring game. Give me OSU.
Yeah,
actual OSU.
In how dare you? In Corvallis, I think the fact that they're giving 3 to Oregon just shows how close of a game they really expect this to be. And I do think it will be a close game, but I think Oregon and Bo Nix end up holding on and pulling this one out. I'm taking the Ducks.
Yeah, I think Bo Nix probably has a little bit more swagger to him than Goldbranson. I just think that at the end of the day, they're going to be able to pass, and Oregon State's not going to be able to. So I have Oregon as well.
All right. TCU, Iowa State. Such a weird one because this is like not a rivalry, actually, to my knowledge. Somebody feel free to correct me and educate me if I'm wrong on this. But I don't think that's actually a rivalry. I like TCU in this one, but I do think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be very low scoring. Possibly no Kendry Miller. Possibly no Quentin Johnson for TCU. Iowa State's just going to drag them down into the mud like they are and make this game ugly. But I think TCU pulls it out.
Yeah, I'm with you. This could very much end up being a TCU-Texas game we saw a couple weeks ago in prime time, where it ends up being like 17-10, and a lot of it is defensive scoring. I do not expect this to be a high-flying game, but I do think TCU pulls out the win.
Yeah, well, after watching TCU last week, I think every single coach in the world needs to go to a clock management class, because in no case is a fire drill field goal the ideal situation. But I think TCU wins. Iowa State's going to struggle to score, but obviously they have a decent defense. So we'll see, because that offense was struggling a little bit against Baylor last week and was getting gashed on defense. So we'll see. But I think Iowa State just struggles to score.
Yep. USC Notre Dame. A fun game here. USC still kind of got some playoff hopes here. Notre Dame looking to play spoiler for a second team here this year. Give me the Trojans, though. Caleb Williams just too hot. He's going to find a way to get this thing done in crunch time.
Yeah, Caleb Williams is why I'm taking the Trojans as well. I do think Notre Dame keeps this close. That defense is good, and that offense has been playing better than they were earlier in the year, but I think Caleb Williams is going to do just enough to give them the win here.
I am known to zag when everyone else is zigging, and so I'm just going to take Notre Dame here just because Whenever I need a good cry, I always watch that tryout scene from Rudy. And and I in all seriousness though, I think USC probably struggles to run the ball a little bit, and that means Foskey's just going to be ears pinned back the entire game. And I don't know that offensive line is prepared for that level of chaos. And I think Brandon Joseph has a decent game as well, maybe a pick or two.
All right. Is that one more here? Why the Apple Cup? 2 more? Jeez. Okay.
The game. We got to pick the game.
No, we don't have to. See you guys. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Washington State. I'll take Washington in this game. It's a 1.5 point spread. Like it's pretty much a pick 'em. But I like Washington just a little bit more here in this one. I think I trust them to get some points when it matters most here more.
Same. I think that Washington's defense is clearly better than Washington State's, which I think will end up mattering more. Washington should be able to score for the most part. I don't want to say at will, but I think they'll be score with ease here against Washington State. And I don't know that Cam Ward and the Cougars can keep up.
Yeah, I think that defensive line for Washington State's been exposed a couple times this year, and so, and I think it's going to be a chaotic, like messy in the mud type game. And I just, I think Washington State has played a few of those, so they have a little bit of experience. But I think Washington just pulls it out at the end.
All right, Matt. The final one here, Michigan and that team down east. I don't know. They're kind of like southeast, right?
Yeah. So. That team Southeast. There you go. I guess that
it just rolls off the tongue, right? Look, I think Ohio State wins this game, but I have no love in my heart for a school to try to trademark the. Like, how big of assholes are you? So I'll be rooting for Michigan in this game, but I think Ohio State ends up pulling it out.
Yeah, I am taking the Ohio State University to get back on the winning streak against that team up north, starting another decade-long winning streak. But it's going to be close. I'm nervous.
Yeah, I think Michigan scores early on their scripted plays, and they may be tempted to hail the victors, but I think Sloopy hangs on in the end, so yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
So game day actually showed the Atubas during the skull session, and they looked locked in. So that eye is going to be dotted immaculately. It's going to be great.
Oh yeah, it's going to be beautiful. Can't wait.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is going to do it here, right? That's our last little piece. So
unless anybody has any news on Colin Schlee and you'd like to let me know now,
make sure to tweet at Matt.
So we just want to thank you guys for those of you that have tuned in every week this season. Our second year doing these shows. I think we've had a lot of fun doing them. Hopefully they gave you guys some value here before you got into the morning slate of games. We'll be doing these for as long as we can, hopefully continuing to improve them. No more what were people sneezing into the microphone last week. I mean, you can see why the herd has been thinned based on last week's debacle. We'll continue to make improvements. But yeah, thank you guys again from the bottom of our hearts. If you know anybody or have anybody that's looking to sign up with Campus to Kent, we are running a bit of a promotion here right now, guys, through Cyber Monday. Any new walk-on or scholarship membership, 25% off. And if you guys are members already, you should have gotten an email already that says that gives you a buy one, get one 50% off for our guides for the upcoming year. So thank you guys for allowing us to do this, for putting your trust in us. Good luck today in all of your fantasy matchups. Go Blue.
How dare you?